It looks like it's working. All right. Well, we might lose 2 hours of talking here.
It'd
Oh
be
no,
amazing
let's
if that
not
was
do
the
that.
beginning of
Hold
this
on.
episode.
I will absolutely keep that as the beginning of this episode.
All right, let's go then. And welcome to episode 42 of the Brewed Sages. Stormbound players with a head for the game. I am Freeloader, and with me, as always, are Sabaiku and Thomas. Sabaiku, how's it going tonight?
Fantastic.
And Thomas, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty all right.
Well, we are the Brewed Sages, easily the second best Stormbound related podcast in production. As a reminder, you can always follow us at Brewed Sages on Twitter, or for all of you whose jogging shorts have gotten twice as long over the years, our email address is thebrewedsages@gmail.com. Real quick, guys, I wanted to sneak this in. I haven't told you that I was going to, but I wanted to. We hit our 1 year anniversary earlier this month, right at the beginning of the month, and we never did anything about it. We didn't even mention it in our last episode. So I just wanted to tip of the hat to everyone who's stuck with us over the year, and congratulate Sabaiku and Thomas. Guys, we are currently recording our 42nd episode, which is easily 41 more than I thought we'd ever do. Yeah, just congrats on the 1 year. Speaking of anniversaries, Thomas, we just finished the Sheepyard. Well, I guess I should say the Stormbound anniversary event. How did that go for you?
I converted a lot of rubies on over to some of the mythic books to be able to start cashing in on some of the fusion stones from those things, and got I think like 150 from the 2,000 fusion stone or the 2,000 rubies that I had, and then just got a crap ton of coins and the extra cards that I already owned. So I'm up to like 30,000, 34,000 coins that I need to do in the exchange shop.
Oh my gosh! Why
Brawl
don't
for
you
days.
Wow.
give some of
That's quite
those to
impressive.
Sabaiku and I? We could use the coins right now to upgrade some cards. Sabaiku, how did it go for you?
Mine went fantastically. I did end up doing a similar thing. I spent some real world money on rubies. I had saved up a bunch also, and I just bought a ton of packs, trying to round out my collection. And now I have a lot of cards to upgrade. But I also spent all my coins on noble books, so I can't upgrade any of them. I'm going to be trying to farm for years to try to make this work.
It goes so much faster than you think.
I did manage to spend 50 of my wife's money.
Freeloader.
Bless her. I bought the 50 ruby pack, and actually, with only I think a few hours to go in the anniversary, I decided that it was worth spending the additional 20. So I went 70. And I am not dissatisfied with the results. I was very happy with what I hit for the most part. The one weird thing about it, although if you think about the flavor of the card, it makes sense. Once I hit my first Ami in a pack, I just started hitting it was like they were replicating. I kept getting Ami after like every pack. It was another Ami. I started with Ami barely at level 4, and I finished with 3 more than level 5 somehow.
Nice.
I,
Crazy.
I
It always works
just
that way.
right. Yeah. Why could it never be Edric? That would have been great. um, but yeah, so that's how it went for me. And just like you, Sabaiku, I could really use some coins. So Thomas, whenever you're feeling generous, you let us know, please.
Unfortunately, I'm going to be saving them for a lot of brawl for a lot of fusion stones because of what we will be talking about in a little bit here.
Ooh,
Foreshadowing.
foreshadowing. Nice.
Nice. All right. Well, moving on from there, guys. Meta check-in. So we don't do a meta report anymore, and we've explained why. For those of you who didn't hear the explanation the first time, the meta is in balance. Sheepyard has done an extraordinarily good job, I believe, of getting the 4 factions to be equally strong. If you are a Swarm main, Winter main, whatever it is, go ahead and play it. It's going to work. There's definitely some decks that are standing out for each faction, and unfortunately, that's a lot harder for us to capture in a way that's particularly accurate than giving you sort of the overview. So instead, we're just going to try to give you some sort of check in on the meta every once in a while. Maybe hopefully some deck doctoring soon. We're trying, folks. I promise. But for the time being, Thomas, how's the meta check-in going?
So I was just talking to you guys right before the podcast. I took a screenshot of the top 20 players in Heroes League and broke down every single deck that each person is playing. And I was only able to count out the top or 11 of the top 20 decks. And it looks like Winter is in first place with 4 decks of the ones that I can remember who's playing what. And then in next place, we've got Swarm with 3 decks in the top 20. And then Ironclad and Shadowfen are tied for 2 decks in the top 20. And I have to say that feels about right. It does feel like Winter either is maybe picking up a little bit more, or people are finally trying it out right here at the very end of the season. Because I do think that I remember seeing a little bit more Swarm. I think I remember there being 4 or 5 decks earlier this month in Swarm, and it seems like they shifted over to Winter. Maybe it's to capitalize on everyone's deck slowing down with the mid-range stuff. So not 100% sure exactly where things are going to go over the course of the next 3 days, but that's exactly where we're at right now today.
Hmm.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
I gotta say, I've been hanging out in the top 50, not near the top like you, but I haven't seen a ton of winter, not as much as I expected after the Chillbeards buff last month. I'm still seeing a lot of Bragda Shadowfen. I'm still seeing a lot of Zeri Swarm, sometimes with Bucks, sometimes without. Still seeing a lot of Ironclad with the structures. There's still a pretty decent variety.
And as the member of the Brood Sages who procrastinates the longest to make Heroes League, I've literally now been in the Heroes League. This is Monday the 27th, and I've been in Heroes League for about 15 minutes now. Um, I will say that this month I've seen more Shadowfen than in previous months. Outside of the sort of the bunch at the top, the last couple of months, I have not seen as much Shadowfen as I would have expected, especially considering Stony J was winning each one of those seasons with a Shadowfen deck. I'm finally starting to see Shadowfen being played at a more balanced rate to the other 3 factions. In previous months, it has been a very Swarm and Ironclad heavy kind of meta at the tail end of the Heroes League. So that kind of gives you that information. I do think the Chillbeard buff Subaiku has caused a little bit of consternation in Reddit and Discord. Do you think that it's warranted, or in your opinion, is it more just a, well, they could have beat me with other things, but now they're beating me with this, so this is what I'm going to complain about?
Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit more the latter. Like, and it's a strong card. Don't get me wrong. It's obviously very, very powerful. It does a huge chunk of damage, but it does a huge chunk of damage when Siren would have done a huge chunk of damage. Most of the time, if I'm getting beat by Chillbeards, I would have gotten beat anyway by any strong runner. But I'm playing a little bit more of a rushy style deck. I'm willing to give my opponent front or take a little bit of extra damage early in the game. So I'm definitely biased by my own play style. I gotta say,
Mm-hmm.
it feels strong, but so do the Swarm and Ironclad and Shadowfen decks I play against. It all feels strong. I feel like I'm barely pulling out a win every time I match up with somebody.
Thomas, we've had a couple of weeks of this now. Do we feel like we've got enough data and sort of in-game experience to render judgment on the Chillbeards buff? Is this too much?
I'd say both yes and no. I don't think there's any card that should, on its own, be able to win the game with the opponent at 20 health. That's just a recipe for disaster, especially because even if it's not necessarily overpowered by itself right now, any card that Sheepyard wants to introduce to Winter, if any good card that they want to introduce to Winter, it could potentially push Winter that much further because there's this single card that can win on that single, or by itself, I mean. And so I don't like it from that perspective. And so I do think that they need to do something about that, even if Siren is only just a little bit weaker. It's too much limiting game space that they're essentially doing to themselves by having this card without doing any revisions to it.
Mm-hmm. In my personal experience, any card that my opponent played was the card that was the reason why they won, right? Like so Chillbeards maybe is a little salt in that wound, but Yeah, it does seem to be like in terms of OTK. Are there any other from 20 base health to 0 kind of OTK cards in the game, or do we need more than one runner or more than one source of damage aside from Chillbeards? Is Chillbeards the lone standout now?
Yeah, it is literally by
Yeah.
itself. Yep.
Well, that's certainly
Yeah.
making winter a bit like, and then we add in the mana cheat, Sabaiku. This is
Well, and that's why it's so dangerous, right? It's winter gets to 6 mana and drops the Dawn Sparks in a place where you can't clear it. Like you're on a clock at that point. If you can't win that turn, then you have to play really good defense for the rest of the game, right? It really limits your ability to play your game plan.
right. That's the trick of it. It forces you to play so different from how you were going to play because Beards exists, right? It doesn't matter if it's a control deck or not. A control deck against Ironclad, you can play differently. As soon as it's a winter control deck, you have to play a certain style because of it.
Yeah, well, we've talked about that in the past for sure, many
Mm-hmm.
times. Mana gain makes problems in the game, and Chillbeards on their own maybe are not a problem. Chillbeards combined with mana gain maybe is a problem. I don't know that it is, right? Like we don't have access to Sheepyard's data. For me, all I can say is I don't see it that much. I don't see just winter. I see a good variety of factions. When I do see winter,
Mm-hmm.
it's not always Chillbeards that kills me. Sometimes it's Siren. That's its own problem.
Well, actually, now that you say that, expanding on exactly what you just said, I don't think people have figured out the best Chillbeards deck yet either. Every single winter deck that I've played, I think Chillbeards was in 3 of the 4 decks, but every single Chillbeards deck has been different. But
Oh, that's
going to
interesting.
like Ironclad Hearthguards, back when they figured that deck out, that was the deck to run. I mean, maybe there was like one card that would be different, a variation, depending on what was going on in the meta. But right now, these Chillbeards decks are all very different from each other. So there is going to be a formula that somebody figures out, and then it is going to be potentially the best deck in the game, somehow even better than Bragda. But
Yeah, that's a good point, right? But there's also more room for freedom. The Hearthguard's Ironclad deck was a much lower curve, so you really had to optimize every card. With a
Mm-hmm.
Chillbeard's Winter deck, you can play, okay, at 6 mana I want to play Dawn Sparks or Twilight Prowlers. It's fine. Both of them work well, just situationally a little bit different. At 5 mana I want to play Fluffy or Loris. They're both viable. It's okay.
yeah, that's
I don't
true.
know if I don't know if it can be optimized the same way, just because there's always pros and cons for each card inclusion.
Well, okay, so there will be a general best deck, and then there will be like that 1 or 2 card change depending on the meta, kind
Yeah,
of
I think
like what
that's
has
right. Yeah.
happened. Yep. So
Yeah,
that
I
is, I
think.
guess, another big fear.
All right, guys, I would love to talk more about this, but this morning Sheepyard released a patch note, and oh my lordy, are these some patch notes, guys? There is so much to talk about. I think we really need to just dive into it. So, shall we go? Let's start first with some balance changes. Sabaiku, can you walk me through the first balance change on Lich Summoners? Pardon me.
Yeah. Lich Summoner's spawn strength is now up to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Strength of the main body is the same, and at level 1, the spawn is the same. At all higher levels, it gets +1 ability. So
Hmm.
at level 5, this is a pretty solid unit. Like it just attacks something, survives a trade, makes a big spawn behind it. I don't think that it really makes a difference. I don't know that you're still going to play this card. We've talked about in the past how there's a lot of competition at the 4 mana spot, especially for 4 mana neutrals. You're probably going to play Edric instead, which, you play it next to a unit for just 1 spawn. You get the same amount of strength or 1 more strength, and you have the opportunity, if your opponent mispositions or, plays Rain of Frogs or something, where you can get multiple spawns and get a ton of strength on the board, where Lich Summoners is unlikely to attack after the first one. So I don't know that it's necessarily still going to see play, but at least it's a pretty solid unit on its own now.
That is a really good point, though. I don't want to move off of this yet quite because I think that's the let's take a look at that maybe a little deeper. Thomas, this whole idea of the 4 mana card being like the power turn, right? So we've got
The
scrap
tech
planners,
card.
we've got Giovanna, we've got Toad, Witches, we've got Edric. Don't really worry too much about Swarm 4 drops, but everybody else aside from Swarm and the neutrals have these fantastic 4 drops. Even with this buff, is there really room for Lich Summoners in a lot of decks?
There's not. Literally, the only corner case that I can think of where this thing is going to see play is when you're playing against Ironclad and you're sick of their scrapped planners, like whatever 4 drop you were going to play that eats up their Destructo bots or whatever, and then it drops the 7 unit behind. They don't necessarily want to use the scrapped planners to eat up the rest of the Lich Summoners on the front because there's that 7 strength behind now. That's the only corner case I can think for this card.
Right, and even then, it's an even trade for them.
Yeah,
It's
and it's
still
still
it's four
meh.
mana. Yeah, it's 4 mana to answer 4 mana. That's fine. Like they're okay.
If it was 7 and
Yeah,
7, awesome. This would be much better, but 6 doesn't
right.
clear very much. And so therefore
No,
it
it
also
doesn't.
doesn't get to spawn anything either.
And then you also have the problem where it spawns behind it, so it doesn't advance your front. You
hmm
can't play it on your baseline
hmm
unless you're attacking straight ahead into something that is 5 strength or less. Like it's just a little too limited in what it does.
Yep.
Yeah, I almost want the main body to be bigger and the spawn to be a little smaller.
Or just buff them both up to 7 or 8 and 8.
Oh, that
No,
feels like
8
power
and 8 would
creep.
be way too much.
Yeah, that feels like
Yeah,
power creep.
7
yeah.
and 7 would be fine.
7 and 7 would be at least comparable to Edric, and then you would consider it.
hmm
Yeah, the thing I don't like about that though is that you can't use Lich Summoners to clear a scrap planner unless the scrap planner's already even if the scrap planner's already gotten value.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Okay, moving on from there, Tricking Alderman. Thomas, you want to talk me through this one?
Yes, please, because I love this. I think this card is awesome now. They gave it +1 to the ability, and so it's a 3 mana, 7 strength, and after surviving damage, deals 5 damage spread randomly to opponent's units. So they gave it a +1 strength buff to the ability almost all the way across. Actually, yeah, all the way across. And the reason I like this so much is because when it is going off with that extra damage that it's shooting over all over the place, it can finally clear a gifted recruits or any of the other 5 power things. So that is actually a big deal. It's really, really irritating when you would want to drop this in the past, because I did try playtesting this in the past, and like, yeah, it was technically ahead of or it was great strength to mana ratio when you're playing it, but because it didn't specifically clear your opponent's front and then also didn't even clear the stuff after the fact, it wasn't good enough. So getting a total of at level 5, 12 damage for 3 mana is pretty dang good.
Yeah, that feels good.
hmm
Yeah, this might see some play now because you're right. The biggest problem was that the damage that it did just didn't do enough to the board state. Now just a little while ago, this got a strength buff, so the strength on the unit is good enough now, and now the damage is actually good enough. You're right. You don't your opponent doesn't lose their front, but at least you get to take out some of their stuff on the board. You get to do some damage, and
It's a two
I
for
think that
one.
it's enough. Yeah, two for
This
one is real good in a control deck.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an awesome control card. It gets rid of Fel Flares entirely. Or I mean, it takes over Fel Flare's spot, which actually did see some play. I can't remember who I just played
Yeah,
against earlier this week, and someone was playing Fel Flares. So yeah,
The one nice thing about Fel Flares is that Fel Flares lets you, positionally at least, target one single unit to clear it. Tricking Alderman, you're kind of hoping that the pings go the way you want them to. But
take
yeah,
that
this
Shadowfen.
right, yeah, exactly. Well, into like tricking Alderman into a rain of frogs is kind of funny.
Uh, yes.
If nothing else, it's an entertain. As a streamer, I look at cards like Trekking Alderman and think of like when it's entertaining to watch. And Trekking Alderman now is probably going to make an appearance in some of my control decks, and specifically, I'm hoping to run into like even an Azure Hatcher with it would be hilarious, right?
No, unfortunately, because or wait, which way does the ability go off?
Right, exactly. That's the question. Sabaiku, for science, you have to help us here.
I'm pretty sure that the Azure Hatcher attacking into it
Mm-hmm.
would trigger
Your ability first.
the Elder's ability first, and
Yep.
then the Azure Hatcher would pop. Yeah.
Oh, that's so terrible, really?
Yeah. Oh well, I
Oh,
mean, you can't
no.
complain too much because this is less mana cost, and so
Sure. No, that's fine.
you're probably going to be able to play green prototypes into the Hatcher and then still be able to clear everything.
Yeah,
Well,
it
that's the
seems
dream
likely.
right there.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on from that, guys, how about razor sharp lynxes? Sabaiku, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so the strength-based ability is now up from +1 to +2, which means that it is just a flexible 4 mana, 8 strength with 1 movement, or 6 strength with 2 movement. Kind of nice vanilla stats, but the flexibility here, the choice to either run it in for damage or to play it for strength is huge. I think this is going to see some play because of this. Honestly, it's
Is it?
Yes, it is.
as good as siege breakers when your opponent doesn't have a tower, but instead of the upside of destroying a structure, the upside is you can put it into their base. And turns out the base is the place.
Yep.
So, Thomas, you think this sees play now?
Absolutely. You play other card games too, I know, and so you never underestimate flexibility. The
No,
flexibility of 8
that's
strength
fair.
and then the flexibility of a 6 strength runner. That's huge. Don't underestimate that.
Yep, it's just vanilla stats, but the fact that it's vanilla stats on both sides, it's big.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
it'll
right.
be. I would
It-
absolutely put this in. If I was looking for just a generally useful neutral card, this would fit the bill.
yep.
Is it better than Edric? No, but
It's also not a legendary.
it'll complement Edric.
Sure.
Yep.
So Thomas, the next card, I hear tell that Sheepyard is moving this card out of just the Pirate Brawl and into Standard. What is this card?
Wait, what? Out of the Pirate Brawl.
I've
The
I've
joke
never
is it
seen
doesn't see any
I've
play in
never seen
ranked
Snake
mode.
Eyes played outside of
Oh,
the Pirate Brawl.
actually,
Sometimes. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Thomas.
I do enjoy Snake Eyes a little bit. I mean, it's more of a Mimi deck,
Yes.
but yes, it is a lot of fun to play Snake Eyes, and they are buffing it so that it just draws 4 cards all the time, which is nice because, yeah, when I am doing like the ultimate, or I've had it at level 5 for a long time, and so it was nice getting the 4 cards, and then doing either draft bound or like the earlier brawls, the warrior or the casual, and getting only three cards is like, oh, that feels kind of bad.
So now it will always draw the 4 cards regardless of your level.
It will
Mhm.
always replace your hand, which is nice. I agree.
That
It
is
just
nice.
it makes it consistent. I like this change. There's no real impact to anything other than the occasional pirate brawl, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Speaking of cards that you don't see very often in Standard,
Why don't you take this one?
oh, you want me to take?
Yeah,
So
why don't you take this one?
I almost got wrecked by Cursive Strings about 2 games ago on my climb to Heroes League. You don't play around it because no one plays it except for, of course, my opponent. Um, they are dropping the mana cost from 7 down to 6. And also they're adjusting the strength thresholds. The abilities will now be 7, 9, 11, 14, and 17, which are actually down from 8, 10, 12, 15, and 18. So if you're doing that math in your head, they are lowering the mana cost by 1 and lowering also the strength thresholds by 1, which means that as much as MKM hates to admit it, this is in fact a burf. For all of you who are hoping to use Cursive Strings on an 18 health unit, now it doesn't matter whether you have it at level 5 or not. You cannot. You're going to have to trade something into that first.
Yeah. So now you can't answer your opponent's Dawn Sparks
Exactly.
with cursive strings.
With Cursive Strings. I will say that the only time I've personally played Cursive Strings over the last couple of years, well, I guess it's not quite a couple of years, year and a half since we started playing, I started trying to play it with Aaron, Archdruid Aaron. And I don't know that this mana reduction really matters to Aaron. It is hilarious playing Aaron into Cursive Strings Toxic Sack. I highly recommend it if you've never tried that combo. But I'm not sure how much this is really going to impact Cursive Strings play rate within the meta. Sabaiku, your thoughts?
Mana reduction is big, it always is, but the problem is you're just spending 6 mana on one card, and you're only removing one of your opponent's units. And there are times when that is occasionally impactful, but most of the time it's just not doing enough with your turn. So I
Yeah.
don't think it'll really see much of a play, a change in play at all. The change of the strength threshold, there was no need for that. It wasn't going to see play anyway. It looks like it's like it looks literally like it was done so that you couldn't use it on Dawn Sparks, which frankly I would love to. If it were 6 mana and actually did answer Dawn Sparks, I would absolutely use this card.
No, you wouldn't, because you don't see Dawn, like, as much as Dawn Sparks annoys you, you don't see Dawn Sparks at a rate high enough to justify this card's inclusion.
That is actually 100% true.
Thomas, what do you think?
I think I'm going to leave my reservation out on this one for right now because there's probably a decent number of 10 strength things that you can convert with this, which is a 20 strength power swing for 6 mana, which is good. It's not great, it's
Sure.
good. The flexibility is nice to being able to answer anything on the board, but yeah,
Well,
that's as far as my thought process has gone on this thing so far, is that it's fine.
Yeah, that's fair.
Having played a lot of Shadowfen, and I love conversion. Conversion to me is one of those twofers, right? Like, not only do I remove a unit of yours, but I gain a unit.
Mhm.
It always felt good. I loved clerics. I love blood ministers. None of those cards really see a ton of play because they're all such poor tempo, and without a good target on the board, they are even worse tempo.
And you
Uh,
also have to have board for those ones.
Sure, sure. But even if you're just going to try to play Cursive Strings alone, too often these cards, having tried to play a controlling Shadowfen deck that uses conversion as its sort of main theme, these cards end up dead in hand way too often. Your opponent plays 3 cards. Those 3 cards are, let's say, Westwind Sailors, Doppelbox, and green prototypes. Do you really want to play Cursive Strings on any of that?
Yeah, you play Cursive Strings on the Doppelbox in front, and then you get to clear both of those.
Oh man, Value Town.
Value! That's the
No,
problem that
but I mean, there's also a lot of other 6 mana cards that you also don't want to be playing when your opponent does that as well, and in that
that's fair.
defense.
To be clear, Chestnuts is not one of them. You want to stick it right in front of that green prototypes.
Yes, please.
Or the Doppelbox. That is a target rich environment for Chestnut.
Yeah, it's really only good against, a slower deck where you're looking to convert something large. They play Fluffy or Loris, and you got, like Thomas said, you got something 10 or 12 strength on the board. You just turn it around. But I think those situations are so infrequent that it's just not worth.
Yeah. I'm mostly keeping the verdict out because I remember seeing the balance change for Cordia, seeing the reduction from 7 mana down to 6 mana, and I was like, still not going to see literally any play because it never did. And now it is an extreme meta card.
Sure, but the
yeah.
difference there is that Cordia can be played defensively or offensively. It can
Yep.
be played when you have board or no board. It doesn't
Yep.
really matter. You can just put it down. It's a proactive card. This is a reactive card and is very situational, so there's a big difference there. You could make this 5 mana and I don't think it would still see a ton of play.
Okay.
Well, I agree with
5
that.
mana, I would disagree, but I think you made a strong enough argument for the rest of that I can agree at 6.
Well, look at it this way. Do you play Confinement at 3 mana?
I do not.
Right. Okay, so Confinement can confine an 80 health Lady Rhyme.
But again, we're talking about the general things that are on the board, and since in Heroes League, I'm generally talking about level 5 stuff. And when we were just talking about, generally your opponent's going to have at most like a 10 strength thing on the board. So for 3 mana, you get 9 damage out of it, but your opponent is guaranteed left a unit on the board.
Sure. No, that's fair. That's fair.
Right.
I don't know. I
Well,
just look at this at 5, and I agree with Sabaiku. All right, let's move on.
let's move on to another 5 mana situational card.
Speaking of cards that never see play, Thomas, you want to walk us through the next balance change?
Oh man, such a massive change to this thing. Flaming Stream gets 1 more point of damage across the board.
I'm sorry, what? Who's in the what's in now?
Oh, Flaming Stream. It is an
Oh,
ironclad
that's a
card.
card. Oh, okay. That's a card in the game. I will say this: looking at Razor Sharp Lynxes, Trekking Alderman, Snake Eyes, Cursive Strings, Lich Summoners, and Flaming Stream, Sheepyard has their finger on the pulse of the cards that are not seeing play. Like they are properly identifying the cards that need help.
Mhm.
Well, that is true. Of these, I do think a couple of these will see play now in
Mm-hmm,
ranked mode. I
mm-hmm.
do.
Yep, I
Flaming Stream
agree
is
with that.
not one of them.
I feel so bad for poor Sheepyard because they accidentally pushed something a little bit too far, and then everyone's up in arms saying no, just all these terrible things, like that they're just trying to squeeze every penny out of everybody. But then they don't power something up quite enough, and we just poke fun at them the entire time.
Yeah,
I mean, look,
it's a fine
they're
line to walk. It is.
Oh,
it is
absolutely.
they're doing the right thing, right?
Hmm.
They
Absolutely.
bought this game from Paladin, and they are doing what they can to try to maximize the impact of what they bought without having to create entirely new game and mode or entirely new library of cards from scratch. They're trying to take what was already there, the assets they bought, and trying to turn them into playable cards. Maybe not all of them are game breaking cards or auto includes, but they're trying to bring all of the cards in your library, whatever library you have, wherever you are in the game, and trying to make those cards playable. And I mean, I tip my hat to them. That is, yes, that's what I want. Every once in a while, they chill beards a card, and maybe that's a little too much. But look, we'll be laughing. And Cat Loader's here. He agrees with me. They we will be laughing when they go back to Flaming Stream in X number of months, trying to make it more enticing to people to play it because it still won't be a meta card after this. But they're doing the right thing. I mean, if they chill beards every card, that's just going to get annoying, right? Like, oh my
It
100%
does.
agree.
gosh, now, right.
It does.
So this is good. I have wanted Razor Sharp Lynxes to be a super like a good card to play ever since it was like the third or fourth card I ever hit level 3 with. And I've never played it. I've tried and tried and tried. I am so excited to try and play Razor Sharp Lynxes because of that. With that in mind, however, along with trying to increase the play rate of the assets that they bought, Sheepyard is also introducing new cards into the library, right? And Sabaiku, they're going to be introducing a whole bunch of new ancients coming up. The first of which is Bounded Demon. Would you like to walk us through this?
Yeah, Bounded Demon, a 4 mana ancient, 1/2/2/3/4 strength. So level 5, 4 strength with 0 movement. Before moving, spawn a unit with 2/2/3/3/4 strength on both sides. So
Ooh.
you play this to open the game, you put it on your baseline. Next turn, it moves up along with, now it's got 2 buddies. It can be 12 strength for 4 mana, which is pretty good. It can be 4 strength for 4 mana, which is pretty terrible. Um, I think ultimately this kind of is a little too situational. It can't defend.
Mm.
It's not something you can play to hold your front like you can. You know, we've talked about Edric a bunch already. Throw this out there this time too, because it's the same thing, right? Any 4 mana that spawns other units, it's got to be compared to Edric. That's kind of the gold standard, and it just isn't as good. Like, it's really only good on your first turn, and then you kind of never want to see it again. Like the Collector Murs of the Ancients.
Or the Shady Ghoul. Yeah. Thomas, there's just so many 4 mana cards that are so strong in this game. Is there room for Bounded Demon?
There is an equals. I mean, like when you take a look at it, 4 mana,
Ooh.
1 strength, and then you get 2 units on each side, or a unit on each side with 2 strength. That's 5 power for 4 mana, and equals is so slow that you have no problem dropping this on your baseline and getting that potentially even 2 triggers off this thing total, 2 maybe even 3, and just getting just a whole bunch of board value out of this thing. So I think an equals is just fine. I like it's actually probably perfectly or maybe even kind of good. But then
Ooh.
by the time we get to level 5, it's garbage. There's no way that you're ever going to want to play this, and unfortunately, like even looking at the stats and like the overall ability, I wouldn't want them to give this thing any more strength, because it's one of those things where if your opponent drops it, you don't have an answer right away, it's game over if it had any more strength.
Yeah, and I was thinking the same thing. I was like, oh, why couldn't they just give it movement so it spawns once, but then it's guaranteed to spawn once? And that's just actually too strong and too consistent.
Hmm.
And I would not like that either. So I agree with you. Like I think it's a very fine line here that they're trying to walk between underpowered and overpowered. And frankly, I don't see a way to modify this to have it meet somewhere in the middle.
Yep.
Okay. It is worth noting, I believe, that this before moving mechanic is going to be, it looks like, the new ancient thing, right? So expect to hear that more often. In fact, Thomas, there's another before moving, Lost Psyches. Log us through that.
All right, so this guy will just have 3 mana cost, and his ability is before moving, teleport itself to a random tile in its row. Its strength going up is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so the exact same strength of a Westwind Sailor. But yeah, before it moves, it's going to first teleport itself to a open spot in its own row and then moves forward. Sorry guys, it's not good.
Spiker, this is hilarious. I go to try to make a trade with this card. I play it to trade into something and get a nice clean trade, and instead
Whoops.
it just jumps away.
Well, here's the thing though. It can actually, according to the FAQ in the patch notes, can move onto the same tile that it currently occupies. So maybe you do get your trade after all. You don't know.
It's
Here's my
casino
problem with it.
bound.
Right, my problem with this is that it's exactly the same stats as Westwind, so I'm just going to put in Westwind because Westwind does what I want it to do.
Every
If
single
it
time.
had one more strength, so there was a drawback, I would use it in a heartbeat. I think it would be so much fun, and I think it would be usable, and it would at least add a degree of randomness to the game. This is adding a degree of randomness for no gain. I'm not getting anything in that trade.
Right, exactly. So like this is kind of the argument of heliotroopers, right? Heliotroopers are worth the extra mana because there's a downside to it. This is, to your point, a downside with no additional benefit. So why would you ever choose it over the Westwind? I'm trying to think of a situation in which you would want this randomness, and I can't think of it. So yeah, I feel like this has already been nerfed.
Yeah. I mean, in those extreme scenarios where you just needed to be able to get to that spot for whatever reason that you can't currently play in, and like the 1 in 100 games where, oh, if I just had a very random card that moved to or kind of like a doppelbox almost, where it jumps forward. That's almost what this is doing, but still not quite.
Yeah,
Well,
because it can't move forward, it just basically is never better than Westwind. Like great, it moves to a different spot where I could have just played it anyway.
no. Wait. There is one thing that is better. In a situation where the West Wind would have to attack left or right, you could play it in that cell and have it jump to the other side of the unit and instead move forward, right?
I don't know, honestly. I don't know what that interaction would look like. It says before moving. It
Sure.
doesn't have fixedly forward. So if it jumps next to another unit, will it then attack that unit?
It
That's
should.
really, it should.
Yeah, that's exactly the way that everything is programmed. Because the very first ability is that it's first going to teleport itself. After it gets done teleporting, then it's going to do any attacking left, right, or forward. Because that's the exact same way
Hmm.
that Sparkly Kitties is doing. It's
Right.
going
Good point.
to do its
Ooh,
confusion thing
excellent
first,
point.
and then afterwards, if there is a unit on the left or right, then it's going to continue with that program to attack the left or the right. This is going
Cool.
to do the same
Okay.
thing.
So in that case, it is no better than West Wind.
Correct. And
All
it's
right.
just worse.
In fact, it's just worse.
So here's where it maybe is nope. Never mind. Just
We're going through
I
mental
was
hoops to
trying.
try and figure out a way, but just
Yeah.
can't quit there.
If they
There,
would buff it,
there's a
by
random
one
use
health.
case. Merc is
If
going
they
to
would
make a
buff it,
video on like day one and show it in like a use case we didn't think about, and it'll be great. But
there you go. And we will be kicking ourselves, wishing we had just asked Merc ahead of time. Hey,
Oh, or like Arthas and is gonna use like Temple of Time and just do some shenanigans.
oh no, that would be so good as well. All right, so who wants to take erratic neglects?
yeah, I'll take that. So
All right.
you know me, I'm going to always take the 1 mana card and stick that in my deck.
Yeah, it's got no
So
movement though.
1 mana, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strength, 0 movement. So, basically summon militia, but you can choose where it is placed. And before moving on your next turn, it will get a random status effect. And those can be either it'll be frozen, confused, vitalized, poisoned, or silenced, and then it will move. I assume that it will get poisoned and then or vitalized, and then the poison or vitalized tick will happen afterward. But I'm not actually sure what the order of operations there.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, because I mean, the poison is impactful. So is the confusion.
And
I
so
do
is the
think
vitality on a 5 strength. Vitality giving it an extra strength before it moves could be the difference between
matters.
it winning a trade or not. 5 strength, like we talked about before, is a break point.
It's
Yep.
not going to get it though because status effects always happen before any abilities on the card happen, like the before attacking. But if it was already poisoned, poison happens first and then the before attacking trigger happens, like on Green Gale Serpents, for example. So,
Oh,
same
Well,
thing is
that's
going to happen
because
for this.
but before moving is not the same as before attacking, right? It has to move in order to attack, but before it moves is when the poison happens. It's kind of at the same phase, and I don't know which one is going to go first.
that's a really good point.
I would assume it's still going to be the abilities because
Hmm.
think of freeze. Does freeze happen at the beginning of your or like unfreezing your stuff happen at the beginning of turn, or does it
But
wait
beginning of
until the
turn
move
isn't the
phase?
same thing as right. So freeze thaws at the movement phase,
Hmm.
but
And freeze thaw is after movement is finished.
Correct.
So this
mm,
actually sounds like this should get the
the status effect, and then
yeah.
Well,
yeah,
the crazy thing with freezes, it sounds like it's not going to move this turn because it's going to be frozen, and then it'll immediately thaw itself. Is that
right. So
right?
it will be it won't move this turn, but it will not stick around frozen an extra turn, I think.
Yeah,
Correct.
so you play it, and then obviously
So
it has
then
0 movement, so it does nothing. And then next turn, if it gets the freeze status, it freezes itself, doesn't move, and then unfreezes.
so
Oh,
Giovanna
you're
is not a
right.
reasonable counter to this card then.
Yep.
But Marked as Prey still works.
Yeah, the one thing that I find interesting about this card is that status effects in this game are mostly pejorative, right? Like we have vitalized, which I love. And honestly, I love a lot of the other ones as well, but not in my own card. If I'm going to play a card that's going to silence itself or poison itself or freeze itself or confuse, like that's a lot of, hey, bad news, you rolled poorly.
Yeah, there's really only one positive outcome, and that's vitality. There's one neutral outcome, and that's silenced, right? Then it just won't do anything anymore, and that's fine. You got 1 mana, 5 strength. You're happy with that. Frozen, confused, or poisoned, all kind of you're not thrilled with for sure.
Doesn't it feel like this card should have movement or more strength to justify so many downsides?
Nope, nope,
Nope.
absolutely not.
Oh, okay. No, no,
Please do
no,
not
no, no.
give it anything else. It's already going to be pretty good just because it's a 1 mana 5 strength that you can place it where you want,
Oh,
and
good
because
point.
Absolutely.
the status effect happens at the start of your next turn because it doesn't move. It's got 0 movement, so it's not going
Mm.
to get a negative effect until it's already eaten a trade from your opponent. So
Yep.
most of the time, it's just a 1 mana 5 strength, and you've come out ahead.
Yep. Fun fact: this is the old Lawless Herd. Lawless Herd used to be 1 mana, 5 strength at level
Really?
5. Yep. And this will see, I mean, most people that are playing Summon Militia will take out Summon Militia and put this straight in
I'm going to
because
be
it
honest.
feels.
That's exactly what I thought I would do.
Because, I mean, the amount of people that are playing green prototypes to take out a Summon Militia get to do the exact same thing with this. I mean, again, granted, you don't get your opponent's front wiped, but when you need to wipe something out, you need to wipe something out. And this is a great way to do that.
You control where you place it. So yeah, it's you're gonna play green prototypes in the same deck regardless, because I cannot think of a single deck that runs summon militia and not green prototypes.
And as somebody that played a decent amount of Mistwives in the past, I can tell you this works just fine there.
Yeah, this is better
Absolutely.
than summon militia
Right.
again.
It's
All
better
right.
than summon militia because you can put it where you want. It's better than green prototypes a lot of the time because green prototypes moves, and if you need to play Mistwives defensively, oftentimes your green prototypes actually doesn't allow that because it moves
Yes.
out of the way or it doesn't survive a trade. So
Well,
this,
or when your opponent has their unit tucked in your baseline corner and your summon or your green prototypes cannot do anything to then be able to proc Mistwives ability. This one, you just set it one unit or to the, I guess, third column in, and Mistwives can still attack.
yep.
You guys have convinced me. This is a auto include in a Mistwives style deck.
Absolutely.
Any
Yeah.
sort of rush deck is gonna
Yep.
play this, I suspect. I
Yep.
would definitely slot this in a lot of decks just as a good general utility card.
Our
Any
Hearth
deck
decks.
playing Ubis, right? Because now it's for 1 mana I can control exactly where it is, and it's another a unit type
Mm-hmm.
to
True.
trigger off of Ubis. Oh, this
Yep.
is good.
Yeah, and
This is really
Thomas,
good.
you said the Hearth. Yeah, I used to play the Hearth in the same deck with the Mistwives. I would very often open up on 4 mana with just the Hearth and summon Militia.
Which
I
you'd
would.
still want to do that over this, but there's no reason not to have both.
Just remember to play this not in the cell next to the hearth because confusion
Ooh.
could clear.
Huh, yeah, good point.
Okay, moving on. Thomas, do you want to give me fragmented essences?
So, Fragmented Essences, the next extremely powerful card on top of Erratic Neglects. It's a 2 mana card, strength going 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No movement, but its ability, unlike the downside that Erratic had, this thing has, before moving, split its strength equally into a unit on both sides. It can't split again for this movement, but it's essentially so like the 5 level card. It's going to split itself into a random 4 and a 3 strength on each side of each cell of where it previously was, and then move forward. So 7 strength for 2 mana is great, and then there's no downside to that ability, is there?
Well, I guess the only real downside is that the 4 and the 3 don't really survive trades, so your opponent can kind of plan around it.
But when you're playing, okay, so if you're playing a control deck, 7 strength for 2 mana that you're probably just plopping in front of a weakened scrap planners or anything else
Yeah.
is fine. It's kind of like the reason why I'm using Ice Flakes in some decks. Um, Ice Flakes, it's fine. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's perfectly acceptable. The downside of not moving next turn actually does make a difference for the Ice Flakes. This one does get to move, so I do like that. Oh, it's not going to be able to clear anything on your opponent's turn,
Right. So it's going
or
to
I mean on your next turn.
and that's what I was getting at, right? It'll split into a 4 and a 3, and then neither of those are really going to do much. It'll chip down a couple of units, but it won't actually clear anything when it moves. I don't think I think that's the literal only downside to this card, though. I think it's fantastic design. I like the way that it plays with how things move on the board, and I like the fact that it really encourages a snowball style deck, right? Like we talked about the Hearth in relation to the last card. Imagine playing this with the Hearth, right? Like it gets buffed up and it splits and something survives because it's got a lot of distributed stats across the board, and then it gets buffed and it gets split again, and it keeps on rolling down the board like that.
Yeah, this
This
is a
deck
good
with
card.
this card with Bragda is very interesting. Do we ever want to play Lawless Herd over this?
Lawless Herd is a satyr, and there's some synergy there. So,
Okay.
and
Okay.
that start with that. Um,
Well, this is also a common, so you're more likely to have it leveled up or at least at the same level
yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
in the lower
That
leagues.
agreed.
and it kind of, yeah, I think kind of just replaces Lawless Herd in a lot of the same decks, unless you're specifically going for a Satyr strategy. This doesn't help you with Swarm Collars, but
Do you
it
ever
sure is
want to
pretty good.
play Head Start over this in a non-satyr centric swarm deck? Because it's
Yeah,
the same mana. It's the same
yeah.
mana,
I will
but
be
this
swapping
you can
out.
control where you play.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly the same argument that we were just making for erratic. Instead of
Mm-hmm.
summon militia, get rid of that randomness.
Yeah, I used to play a little bit of a swarm deck with Archdruid Aaron and Dark Harvest and Needle Blast, and I found that only having 2 spells was a little rough, so I put Head Start in there as the
Okay.
third. So if you're
Because
playing
it's
that
such good value.
specifically, I think that that would be okay.
Okay. Okay.
Other than that, I think probably this goes everywhere else. Like right now I'm playing a Zuri Bucks deck in the Heroes League, and I would absolutely put this in that deck, right? Like
Right.
it
Right. Right. Right.
something's gonna survive. It's gonna split and move, and there's gonna be something on the board for me to buff. It splits up. So if I play this like if you just open with green prototypes in this, you got 3 units on the board, you're baiting your opponent to go wide, so your Edric gets some value. It's going to be really, really good in that deck.
It feels like these last two ancients are, in fact, a slight amount of power creep over cards that are already in the game, which
It
I'm not
definitely
upset
does.
about.
Yeah.
I don't think that the last one, Erratic Neglects, is really power creep. It's summon militia with a different downside.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay. Yeah.
okay, okay.
This one is a little harder to say that it's not power
Yep.
creep. It's definitely just really good and will replace Lawless Herd
Yep.
and potentially Head Start. Or maybe,
Well,
honestly, if you're playing this, you probably play Head Start in the same deck.
and can erratic neglects really be power creep when Lawless Herd literally was a vanilla 1 mana 5 strength at one point in time, or for a long time?
That's fair, but it's not anymore. The reality of the game is that's not what Lawless Herd is. I look at this card, Fragmented Essences, and I think of on 7 playing this into Zuri.
Yep, or just playing this with Bucks, right? Like
Right,
again, you got to
exactly.
remember with this card, each split unit is in itself a fragmented essence and not a token. So each one of those will continue to split. So like anything you do to buff this up just continues to pay off down the road. Like yes, the unit
Sweet.
splits
Hmm.
up, so you no longer have like 1 12 strength, you have 2 6s, but honestly that's not a
That's
bad
good.
thing.
No, no, I'll take that. I'm actually really excited to play around with Fragmented Essences specifically. I do
Yeah,
feel that Swarm is the natural home for it for getting the most amount of value, but that's kind of irrelevant. Any deck that runs Lawless Herd should be running this maybe instead.
The big downside now that like we're talking about this thing as purely only having upside. This thing
Yep.
has a massive downside though. The more
Okay.
it splits, or even actually after its first split, if it doesn't get a big strength buff, is just going to be eaten up by Beasts of Terror. And we're talking about Swarm, which already generally runs a lot of satyrs. So Beasts
Mm,
of Terror play might go up if this gets too much play, just because you're going to eat this thing up for lunch after a first split.
that is
so
true, but then they won't have Beasts of Terror available to attack your satyrs, right? Like they have
right,
to
this is an
choose where they're
ancient,
using it,
That's true.
right? You're just making more targets for your opponent. Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
You
but
play
I
this
mean,
in a
you also
deck that also runs Rain of Frogs, for example. Which one are you beasting?
well, so you don't want to have to wait to play your Beast of Terror, and the first good opportunity that you have, you do it. I mean, it's unfortunate when you have to wait for your opponent to play the Doppelbox to then be able to play Beast of Terror. And if they're
Right. Okay.
constantly already
Okay.
playing cards that have similar unit types, then yeah, just throw it out because you're gonna get that value. So I
That's
don't
true.
think that's a fair enough argument to say, oh, then they can't use it for Doppelbox.
Well, what I'm saying is that it means that you can proactively play around it, or not necessarily play around it, but you can bait it out and force your opponent to use it in a situation that's less favorable. And I mean, you're talking about 4 mana Beast of Terror. You could play for 4 mana Doppelbox and this, and make your opponent choose.
Oof.
Right, one of those is going to stick around for Zuri next turn. You decide which one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It
You
poses
win.
problems. It poses problems for your opponent for sure if you're
It
playing a
does.
buff heavy deck. Um,
So you're
and
saying this probably should have been 6 strength for 2 mana?
Well, then it directly competes
maybe.
with Lawless.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And that
which
seems
is
a
But
little
fine.
more reasonable for a neutral. The whole
Plus,
point
again,
in my
this
head was like, so Lawless is the neutral. The faction card should be more, stronger. And Head Start is stronger than Lawless, so that checks out. This now feels like it's just as good as Lawless, as Head Start.
it's better.
It's better though, right? Now,
Yeah.
the more we talk through it, I'm like, well, actually, this isn't just as good as Head Start. This I have control over where I place it, which immediately makes it better than Head Start.
Yeah.
It splits, it divides. So the crazy thing about it is, if you vitalize it, both parts are going to be growing.
Oh my
it's true.
gosh.
If you poison it, both parts will be
Okay.
poisoned. So,
Yes.
Try not to poison it.
but then you're talking about like Amber Hides to clear 2 units after it splits, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not.
No, that's fair.
It's still going to be a pretty good value for you.
So
Mhm.
this is going to be played in Potion of Growth decks.
Oh,
You're going to want to
yeah.
play Potion of
Zuri.
Growth, personal servers, maybe.
Zuri.
You're definitely playing it with Zuri and Bucks. I'm going to definitely be doing that as soon
But
as
just
I get this
so
to a
just like with
reasonable level.
Erratic Neglects, you could also do it with Mistwives, because you're probably going to be more of an aggro deck with Mistwives, and getting Mistwives tucked away behind a 7 strength card, kind of like what we used to talk about ideal situation for Ice Flakes was. This is just an upgrade over Ice Flakes.
Yes, because your opponent in the mirror match can't Shyvana it.
Yeah.
Oh
Well,
my
and then
gosh.
this is going to move at the next turn, whereas Ice Flakes never did, and that puts a 3 and a 4 strength on your opponent's baseline after Mistwives just smashed in. I guess your opponent obviously has to clear this, but
Yeah,
Oh,
so
wow.
the way
This is
that this
good.
moves is that this is going to kind of Y out and try to move forward. And that movement is predictable. You can plan for it, but your opponent can play around it. You and it might mess up in a rush deck, like you tuck this into to protect a Mistwives in the corner or whatever. It might mess up your positioning for the next turn because it moves differently than everything else in your deck. It's going to take a little getting used to in that regard, but yeah, gosh, it's going to make a base lock so much easier.
Well,
yes, it is.
potentially. Oh gosh, this is so neat. I have to say, I'm more excited about these last 2 cards and getting to experiment with them and figure out not only play styles with them, but how to play against them. Is it
Yeah.
better for me to surround a Fragmented Essence left and right to prevent the split from happening, and
Well,
then just allowing them to have a 7 strength that moves forward, or is it better for me to like what's the right way to play around this?
well, if you've got, okay, so if this is level 5 and you've got a level 5 Destructo Boss, just attack into it, because they're going to be left with 1 strength afterwards, so it's not going to split.
You're not really selling me on like okay,
Yeah.
so my opponent gets to keep front and have a unit, and I spent 2 mana to do what?
That's because
Yeah,
it's a 2 strength or 2 mana cost strength card. That is the issue.
yeah, this one might be getting tuned down
Yep,
in a future
agreed.
patch, I suspect.
Yeah,
I agree.
All right, I would love to spend all night talking about this card because this is probably the card I'm going to experiment with most once it gets released. But guys, there's been some modifications to Brawl, which I don't know. Some of them, just browsing through the patch notes, they might be notable. I'll start with the simple one. There's going to be a 50% discount for Brawl starting October 28th. Yay, I love cheap brawls. I've always loved cheap brawls. My name is Freeloader. That's kind of expected. But Thomas, there's some new modifiers. Can you talk us through the first one, Reserved Management?
Oh boy, play Winter. Any unused mana is carried over to the next turn. There's no such thing as wasted mana anymore.
Yeah,
This seems like a bad idea.
It seems
it
like
seems
a
like a
really
bad
bad idea.
What you're gonna get is winter mirrors where nobody does anything for the first 3 turns, and then they just unload.
They just gift.
say gift into runner chillbeards and the game is over. Whoever gets there first wins.
I
Right?
guess
Like
maybe Swarm, because I'll have to count out the math. There's going to be some math that goes into this. Swarm might be able to get there too.
with what? Queen?
No, you just
No.
play a couple of runners, just Devastators, and win.
I mean, you
Devastators
gotta
doesn't
play.
one shot in the same way Chillbeards
No,
does.
that's
It
the
doesn't.
thing. Is like
But okay, so 3 mana turn, save that. 4 mana turn, save that. 5 mana turn, save
7,
that.
12.
Without even counting the mana, just count the damage from 4 cards going from the start of your base, right? You need Grim Couriers
Goats?
that moves 3.
Oh, okay. I was gonna go
Well,
goats.
no, so we've done
Uh,
this before, and you can win with Swarm on 5 mana turn and do 28 damage. I'd have to find the Reddit post again where there was a lot of people that were trying to figure out like the truly best thing that you can do. And yeah, for Swarm, on your 5 mana turn, you can do a total of 28 damage.
Wow, really?
Yes.
if
It
you had
was
3 plus 4 plus 5 mana.
Yeah, it was like Restless Goats
Okay.
and Summon Militia on the front line, and then next turn was like Devastators, and then the next turn was Green Prototypes and Forgotten Souls, and I
Right,
think
but
that was it.
mana banking doesn't help there because you need more than 4 cards.
Yep, but your opponent can't mana bank with Winter if they are getting gunned down with this kind
Okay.
of strength.
That's fair. That's fair. So they have to have Hunter's Vengeance in the deck and get reset by a turn or two.
Hmm.
Can Shadowfen do it with like a Rain Azure Hatcher? No, it cannot, right? That's only 18 and Butchers, right? 6, 6, and 6. Yeah, there's no. So it has to be Swarm
Or
or it
Winter.
has to be Winter.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's usually the way Brawl goes.
That is very true.
Oh man, Spaiku, Chaos Unleashed. Can you walk me through this one?
Chaos Unleashed units get a random status effect, and those are the same status effects we just talked about with the Ancients above, which is frozen, confused, vitalized, poisoned, or silenced
Not
when they are played.
great.
So basically, like we talked about, one of those is positive, one of those is often neutral, but silence can actually be bad. Maybe you're trying to jam hairy chestnuts in there.
That would be so bad. Oh no.
You know,
Green Prototypes.
green prototypes
Ooh.
getting silence is fantastic.
Hmm.
But
That's
unfortunately,
good,
for the most part, this is going to be just you have to get a negative status effect on your units when you play them, and it's going to be really annoying.
Well, wait, but if you plan for poison, you could play like an Amber Hides marked as prey kind of deck. If you plan for freeze, you could play Giovanna. You could play oh gosh, I'm drawing the a
Yeah.
blank. Help me out. The 4 mana epic winter
For-
card that deals
mid-
damage to everything around
Midwinter
it.
Chaos it's a rare, not an epic. Yeah,
Oh, is it a rare?
yeah.
Oh,
Midwinter is a rare. Yeah, so that could clear some stuff for you. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the way you approach this is you target poison or freeze, and you try to deal
and then
with
you
it
run
that
some
way.
confusion stuff, right?
Or
You run
Temple
some
the Mind.
confusion stuff too. Okay, you could do that too.
If your opponent plays 0 movement stuff, you could try to target confusion with like hair raising cats, but the confusion wears off after it moves. So anything with movement,
right.
it won't
Just
the confusion won't
shakes it.
stick. Yeah.
Right. Huh. I mean,
Yep.
this one seems really balanced though, because both of you, you and your opponent, are struggling with the same problem.
Yeah. Little
Whereas
RNG
reserve
heavy there.
Right. Yeah, it's RNG heavy, but it's balanced. Everybody's got the same kind of problem, and it's a little bit of a deck building exercise to see how you can best leverage that. Whereas the previous one seems like, well, it's kind of already figured out. It's Swarm or Winter. Thomas, going back to you, steady growth.
So cards level up to level 5 when cycled. They can also be leveled up beyond the casual/warrior level cap.
Oh my
So
gosh, this is insane.
everyone that's already at level 5, you don't see any change whatsoever. It's just going to be ladder. But then everybody that's lower than that, and in the casual and the warrior, you're going to want to play cards that are cycling. We were just talking about one earlier.
Yep. You're going to play Snake Eyes and you're going to push every card in your deck up a level as quick as you can.
Oh boy.
MERS is going to be real good because you're going to want to just push that token as many times as you can.
Oh, that's going to be fun.
It'll be weird.
That is going to be fun. I do like these brawls because they start to feel so different from ladder that it feels like a breath of fresh air, right? Like after grinding for a bit, you go into this and suddenly you're playing steady growth. You're like, what is going on? Is this even the same game?
It does dramatically change things. It goes straight over from just grabbing whatever specific modifier for whatever your unit type it is on over to like actual like really thinking about the way that you are going to play this entire game.
Yep.
Sure,
Yep.
sure.
Yeah.
And
Right.
build the deck.
Like we talked about Snake Eyes for this brawl, it'll be interesting, but it's not the only way to approach it. But if the brawl modifier is pirates have 2 speed, well, yeah, you're gonna just jam pirates in there and be done with it. Like there's not a lot of variety there.
Exactly.
Right. I would like to start the motion now to have the max brawl allow steady growth to push up to level 7 or even 11. You know, most amps go to 10, but these ones go to 11. Sabaiku, you want to walk me through the Great Mill?
Playing any card instantly draws another one, and this is nuts. You will always have 4 cards in your hand. Every time you play one, you'll get a new one. It was confirmed on the Discord that if you play Aaron and Aaron plays 2 spells, you'll draw 3 more cards.
What?
Ooh.
What?
If you play Gift of the Wise, you get extra mana, and you just keep going and keep playing cards until you run out
So
of mana.
it's like old Gift of the Wise.
Yeah. But you don't need to combo freebooters with it anymore. You just play what's in your hand.
That's insane.
It is insane. I know how I'm planning on approaching this brawl, and you remember that Shadowfen deck where everything costs 3 and under?
Davide G's, yeah.
Yeah,
I think you.
I'll be doing that.
I think you play a Winter Pack deck with mana gain and no freebooters.
Well, you
I
play
think
First Mutineer.
that feels too slow. First Mutineer definitely goes in this deck, right?
That feels too
Absolutely.
slow. Oh my god. Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh.
Everything is going to be 3 and under, and I'm going to include those new ancients that we just talked about, and I'm
Even if it's
going to
level 1.
play as many cards a turn as I can, and then I'm going to get totally destroyed by Hunter's Vengeance.
Yeah, I have to actually agree with Thomas here. If the level 1 version of your 1 mana ancient, that's erratic neglects. So it's a 1 strength, 0 movement card. But if you add to the end of it, draw a card, well, that's worth jamming into any deck. If it's 1 mana, all of that plus draw a card, yes, it's great. Do it. Yeah, that's gonna be bonkers, guys.
I think I'm gonna play this one with Jev, or however you pronounce her, Jev.
Giovanna.
Giovanna, yeah.
I think that is wholly appropriate.
Yeah. There's going to be times if I do that, by the way, there's going to be times where I'm gonna just throw the Icicle Burst out, hoping to draw into Jev. It's gonna be like, all right, I need to cycle a card. Oh, it's not Jev. It should have been Jev. She's due. Let's just play the Icicle Burst and hope.
Yep.
That ends the main portion of the episode, which means it's time for me to remind you to contact us, preferably in our channel on the Stormbound Discord server or on Twitter at Brewed Sages. You can also email us at thebrewedsages@gmail.com. We also have an additional way for you to reach out and support us now. We have a Gumroad account where you can become patrons of our work. Check out the link on our Stormbound Kitty page. This week, we've heard from Ubermensch. I'm getting over my anger against Rogue Sheep, though. I just recognized that Bladestorm is the actual bane of my low-level deck. Great interview with Stony J. Great podcast. Let's see the meta report next episode. Uber, I'm so sorry. The meta report has stopped being as useful as it really needs to be to justify all of the work from the volunteers that we ask for. We can't in good conscience ask everyone to spend all that time and effort putting together something that tells us that everything is viable. It felt bad. The inventor of the moon, again, love the moon, but big guy, fantastic, says, quote, the volumes were great. I love the interview and the insights after. Well, I'm glad we finally got it right. Arasano says, thank you for this channel and interview. If you look for more players to be interviewed, get in contact. Arasano, we will. Absolutely. He also says, I'm grateful for having more content to watch than just gameplays. Keep it going, guys. We'll do our best. And that's going to do it for this episode. For Sabaiku and Thomas, I am Freeloader. We are the Brood Sages reminding you to stay hydrated.